So I ended up on the floor and he was on top of me. At this point, the knife is visible and it's out of the Del Taco bag. And he's just on top of me on his knees trying to stab me. And I'm on my back and I began pedal kicking him and trying to block the knife as it's coming down, where I'm trying to like hit his forearm. And so I'm kicking that, and then my dog is also biting his ankles during this time.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Terra Newell.
Terra is the real-life hero of the award-winning series Dirty John, which inspired the Los Angeles Times podcast and Bravo TV show.
Terra's inspiring story of survival, family, and perseverance has captured the hearts of millions worldwide and continues through her podcast, Time Out with Terra.
She also travels the country doing speaking tours, talking about red flags in relationships and how you can defend yourself in an attack like she did.
Terra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I basically defended myself against my stepdad. He married my mom and he was a con artist. He stalked me for a little bit. He was basically my biggest nightmare at one point in life. And now I'm here today because I had to take care of him when he tried to attack me. And I'm just so grateful to be here today. And now I'm doing so much to advocate for victims and also share awareness on domestic violence, red flags in relationships, and a lot of other things.
When were you first introduced to John Meehan?
I was first introduced to him a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. My first impression of John was that he was kind of standoffish. He didn't really want to communicate, get to know me, or rather just like be my friend, like my mom's past boyfriends. There's a lot of red flags in the beginning, right when I met him. He didn't have his own car. He said that his cars got stolen from a storage unit in Indio, or not Indio, but Cathedral City in the desert. And it was just a really elaborate story where I was having second thoughts about this. I was just like, this seems a little off. This seems weird to me. This seems just not right. And why wouldn't you give the insurance money for your cars right away? Because it's important to have a car to get to work and to get around places. Found out that he was using my mom's car all the time, and they were together for 2 months at this point. So that was a really big concern, and it was a very fast moving relationship. He was moving in with her and she was lying to me about that. So there was just so many red flags right then and there. But she was so happy and she wanted to believe that this guy was like a great guy. And so she allowed him, or allowed this idea of love. And unfortunately, she didn't really have time away from him too much. Like, he was there every single day. So he was unable to kind of like be out of the picture for her to like take a step back and be like, okay, this is moving way too fast. Like, I should take my time. Instead, it was like all in at that point. But she just kind of got swept off her feet. And it's like, how often does someone come along that makes you feel that way?
What was her dating life before him?
I say there was a lot of men that she dated, but she wasn't head over heels in love with them. And with this guy, with John, she was. So the day before Thanksgiving, I actually got into an argument with John because I was confronting my mom about the car situation, and I was just having questions, and everything was so fast moving. I knew he was moving in there because I found a nursing certificate in the closet that I was staying at, and I just opened my closet to open the closet to put my stuff in there. And it was just like right there in plain sight. So I was like, how could he not be moving in here if he has all his stuff here? So I was confronting her about it, and he came up right behind my mom, and he started yelling at me. And he said that I just didn't want to see my mom happy, that I was using my mom. And so that was a really big concern. And I wasn't allowed at Thanksgiving the next day. And it was like, this guy has been in our life for 2 months. And I've never gotten into a fight like that with, I want to say, like anyone. When I was leaving, my mom wasn't begging me to stay. She was like kind of caught in the middle, where I was just leaving and saying, well, like, guess I'm going to Jacqueline's or wherever. And I actually wasn't really supposed to be at my sister's because her place didn't allow dogs. So I had to sneak in my dogs in like boxes, and so I could stay there for a night, and then left for Vegas the following day.
Wow.
So was he trying to isolate your mom away from you and the rest of the family?
Yes, because I was the one having concerns, and so was my sister. He already isolated my mom from my sister, where my mom and my sister were living together beforehand. And then he decided that they needed to move, and that my mom needed to create boundaries with my sister, because my sister had a lot of issues with him, like a lot more than I did. And she's very vocal about it too.
What were some of the things that she had about him that she was concerned about?
She thought that he was evil. She thought he was a con artist. She thought that he was on dating sites and dating lots of other women. She just like knew he was a player, and she's like very good at investigating, and what she could find on him was not great. And she also found out that he was incarcerated, and she also tried to call Tanya, his ex-wife, beforehand. She was the one that did research, and then she also hired the private investigator with my brothers and sisters. And I honestly kind of stayed out of that. I just waited until there was news and then found that out.
So was she able to get a hold of his ex-wife?
So Tanya got notified that Jacqueline was trying to reach out and about her, but Tanya was very scared. He's made several threats against her and the kids, so she just wanted to stay out of it, and she just didn't want to provoke John.
Was there domestic abuse in that relationship?
I don't think there was at all. I don't think that there was physical abuse. There was only emotional abuse, and he's threatened to kill her. So it was like threats, but like nothing physical yet.
When they went and, their relationship started escalating and they decided to eventually elope, what was your reaction?
I did not find out that they got married until probably like a year or so into the relationship, because it was kept a secret. It happened, I believe, in December. It was right after when we got into a fight. So I found that out like probably a year later, and just thought about that time, and it was very hurtful because she eloped to Vegas, and during that time I was living in Vegas. So she was literally probably 5 miles from me getting married when I was in my house. At that point, he gained control over her finances. He was able to look at her businesses, and it's like whatever is hers is his. And so that was his motto. Like whenever she left him once, and it was a lot harder, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like she went back, is because she didn't want to be in a failed marriage again. She didn't want to She didn't want to believe like that this guy was such a bad guy. And then he also brought her to different lawyers, convincing her that what she found out and what the private investigator found out was not true. It was different John Meehans. So It was like not only he was telling her this stuff, but there was someone with a law background telling her also. And it was really weird because like he would, like over certain lawyers, he would have control over them. And so it was like there was some lawyers that were scared of him. And in the show, there was, I think he tried to get some of the lawyers disbarred. And that's actually that's 100% true.
How was this affecting you at the time?
During this time, I honestly thought I was losing my mind because I thought that I was also being watched somehow. I felt like I lost my mom, and that was just like losing my mom, and then the feeling of being unsafe all the time, that just like made me honestly feel like I was crazy.
Yeah. And what about like your friends at the time? What were they telling you?
I didn't tell them as much as we knew and stuff, just because I just like talking about it, people didn't believe me. And until a lot of like the Dirty John stuff came out, the podcast, the show, like literally all those people that didn't believe me, not all, but like majority of them have told me like, oh, we didn't believe you during that time. Like we just thought you were like crazy. Yeah. And it's just like crazy until it happens to them or like something similar. Or if they like see the show about it, they don't believe it.
So when did the stalking start? When did John start stalking?
So this is honestly blurred. Like, I have no idea when he officially started stalking me. I just have it confirmed that he was stalking me at certain points because I would always feel like I was being watched. And there was that feeling. And then I went on a hike and he called my work. I believe it was like the next day or 2 days after. And he said that he had met me and he had a French accent. And he was trying to have his Rhodesian Ridgebacks washed. And I was a dog groomer, so he was trying to get my schedule, but he also watched me on my hiking trails because how would he know that there was a Rhodesian Ridgebacks that I met that day? There was definitely an end game with him. He wanted to kidnap me, and I believe he wanted to kill me. He I believe there was a lot of knives in the car when the attack happened, and there was zip ties. There was just stuff to like put me in the trunk. And then there was messages to a lawyer that he was sending like probably a week or two, or maybe even a few days prior, saying that he was going to bury my mom and us in the backyard of the Vegas house. And like, it's just so crazy because like he had a plan and he was just going to kill us and then bury us because he hated us.
Wow. What escalated him to that point? What was the turning point where he went into that mode?
My mom had left him for the second time, and they got a dog together. He let that dog go, and he was also in California stalking us a lot of times. So he would leave the dog at the house in Vegas with the door open and a bowl of water and food. And he would come to California and just stalk us. So the dog would get out all the time, and then animal control picked it up one day The dog was at animal control for probably 3 days. My mom was waiting for him to get the dog, and then the dog was still not being picked up. So my mom went and got the dog, and I watched the dog because I worked at a dog kennel, and I worked at as a dog groomer. So it's like I could bring the dog to work with me, and it's a big dog. It's a golden retriever, and it's one of the white ones where it's like 100 pounds. My mom didn't have time for that. And then he also drove the car into a gate, like a private residence. And he just like left the car there and got out, and just like, who knows where he went. But inside the car, it looked like someone was living in there. And that was another sign that he was stalking us.
Right.
Because the van looked like there was junk food all over it. It was like he was going and stalking us and then eating and living in there.
Wow. It's like a stakeout, basically,
yeah.
Like what cops do.
Oh, yeah. And he had the mentality where he thought that like he was mafia mentality, and that he just like, he would do stakeouts, and he would just like, I'm pretty sure he spent like a couple of nights outside of the Coronados watching me. It was all planned. It was, he didn't make any rash decisions. He was planning to kidnap me and kill me. He was planning on staking out. It was like everything was calculated, and then he would have papers on everyone. He was super smart. Like he would have, when my mom lived with him even, he had so many lawsuits going on with other people. And it's like lawsuits that he created where he got into a relationship, and this person like claimed something, and then he just turned it around on them. Mm-hmm. And he was, he got the money for that. And so it was just crazy because there was so many cases where he did manipulate the situation. And I think he even got into a fight with this one lady where she pushed him and he fell down and broke his teeth, and he sued her, and she paid for a full mouth of teeth.
Can you tell us about the day that he did try to kidnap you?
Okay. So that was August 20th. 2015, I believe. And I was getting off work. I was trying to go to the Jason Aldean concert. And so I got off work early, and John also made a call for dog grooming that day. But the dogs were a no-show. So I was able to like leave a little bit early. And so I left my work at probably 5:20, and then I went home, and the gate was broken. I went through the gate. My dog started barking, and I told him to knock it off because I just looked over and I saw this guy fiddling in his trunk with a tire iron, which like I don't know why I wouldn't think like that's a little weird. But I didn't for some reason. And I parked my car where I normally park my car. I got out of the car, I grabbed my dog, and I started walking. And right where my license plate is where John grabbed me by the waist. He looked me in the eyes and he said, "Do you remember me?" I did remember him. I immediately tried to get away from him and tried to run away, and I was unable to disconnect, so I ended up on my back and I ended up falling down, and then he was on top of me. I thought he was first punching me at first, but he actually just had the knife in a Del Taco bag, and I was getting stabbed. But I had my purse up right here, so he actually stabbed my purse a few times instead. And I have like one stab wound there, but like my purse helped protect me in that moment. So I ended up on the floor and he was on top of me. At this point, the knife is visible and it's out of the Del Taco bag. And he's just on top of me on his knees trying to stab me. And I'm on my back and I began pedal kicking him and trying to block the knife as it's coming down, where I'm trying to like hit his forearm when he's coming down and I have rain boots on because I just got off work. And so I'm kicking that, and then my dog is also biting his ankles during this time. Yeah, and I was able to kick the knife out of his hand, and then it landed directly next to me on my right hand side. I'm right-handed, and it landed in the ice pick position, which is the perfect position for picking up a knife. And I picked it up and just started wailing on him, and he started to fall down on me, and I started to push him off. I thought I was stabbing him in the chest, but I guess I was stabbing him in the back. Just like in that moment, I kind of blacked out, and it just, until the police told me, they're like, oh, he has stab wounds in his back. I didn't connect the two. I just was like, no, they're lying. So it's just like weird. But then as he was falling down, I remember pushing him and like holding his head because I watched a lot of Walking Dead. So I like didn't want him to bite me and turn me into a zombie. So like I was pushing him off of me and holding his head. And then I gave thought to the last two, and I stabbed him once right here. And then the last one was in the eye. And that, like, the eye is the softest point of entry to kill the brain. And so I gave thought into those ones because I didn't want him to get back up, and I didn't want him to kill me because, you know, you see all these movies, these horror movies where the perpetrator keeps getting up and you're just like, man, I can't kill him. So, and then I tossed the knife and then scooted away.
That's incredible that you had the strength and the wherewithal to be able to battle in that moment, and even using things throughout, you know, fiction even to apply in that way. I mean, that, yeah. I know that even from a size standpoint, it's like having the just, you know, somebody of that size and everything else like that to be able to do that. It's incredible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at the time? Or were you just not thinking, you were just reacting?
Okay, I feel like I'm one of those cartoon characters, or not cartoon characters, maybe like Harley Quinn, if you've seen like Birds of Prey, where she's just like doing things and it's just like dumb luck on her side. It's like, I was like, oh, not today. Like, why does he have to come here today? And then I was like, I just want to go to the Jason Aldean concert. So I was just like thinking that as that was happening. And it's like, also when it's happening, you're in a state of shock. You're like, I'm sure I was like thinking like what I need to do next, but it's also, I've seen so many shows, I've seen so many like read so many things of how to defend yourself and whatnot, that I think it almost came naturally to my body because I've seen it. So monkey see, monkey do.
Oh, what happened immediately after?
I tossed the knife. I tried to scoot away from his body. I just looked around at myself and I tried to assess myself and see what I needed medically. And I realized that there was a stab wound on my forearm and it was bleeding and it was deep. So I applied pressure to that and I tried to stop the bleeding and by applying pressure. And then I noticed that my dog was running around and he was trying to eat the Del Taco that was in the Del Taco bag. And I was just like, well, in that moment, I was just like, why is he trying to eat the Del Taco? He never tries to eat like food like that. And so I was just like, why is he nervously eating that? And so my mind just went to the worst place. I was like, could there be poison in that? So I yell at him. And then at this point, another lady, the first lady, she came and she was walking her yellow lab. She asked me, she's like, what can I do to help? And I told her just to grab my dog because I didn't want him eating what I thought could be poison. And so she did. And then more people started to show up. This guy that was African American, had dreads. He showed up on a bike and he gave me his sweatshirt, and I put it around my arm for more pressure and so that I wouldn't have to use my hand as something to apply pressure to the wound. And then another girl, Skylar, the one that's in Dateline and all these shows, she came up and she told me, she's like, I'm trained in this. And then she kind of just took charge and she just started asking me questions, trying to calm me down. And then the other guy went to John and he tried to start reviving him. And I kind of freaked out because I was like, the first thing he's going to do is wake up, try to grab the knife and try to kill him now. So I just tried to tell him that he was the one that attacked me, but I was frantic and he kept trying to do CPR. So I decided that I needed to just get away from it and go down the hill a little bit. And so I went down the hill. Skylar walked me down the hill. And then at this point, I realized like I should probably call my mom. And so I asked Skylar to get my phone. She grabbed my phone. I called my mom. Then I called my ex-boyfriend. And then I tried to call my friend that was going to the concert with me. But by that time, the police grabbed my phone because I'm not really supposed to be making phone calls after someone gets stabbed.
Right.
Because it's an active crime scene. So they're like, no. And I think I may have told them to F off too. And I need to call my friend because that's rude. And it was just like I was in such a shock. And now that happened, my goal was to like get to the concert. And so yeah, they just started asking me questions. Then the medic came and they wrapped up my wound, and then I went to the hospital. And on the way like to the hospital, I just asked them, I'm like, do you think that we're going to be able to wrap this up in time to go to Jason Aldean? I guess I could go with like this. And like there was no mirrors or anything, but I had blood on my face. I just looked like a really big mess. I mean, they questioned me until 11 p.m. at night. They wouldn't let me see my mom or anyone, but I was able to bring my dog because he's technically an emotional support animal. So I told them that I would sue them if they didn't let me bring the dog. Because it's just like, you know, when trauma happens, the person's so frantic. And sometimes they're like, okay, this girl's saying that she has an emotional support dog, but does she really? And then it's like sometimes you have to remind people like, oh, I'm legally allowed to have this. You need to let me have this. Otherwise, I'm not going to be happy. And you have to stand your ground. And it's unfortunate, like sometimes the police are just, they see something and they don't have empathy for what this person just went through. Right. So it's like you have to stand your ground, and sometimes you have to argue with them to get your way.
When did they tell you he was dead?
I thought I killed him because I stabbed him in the brain. But I found out that he was revived on the scene, that they brought him to Global. And I don't think that fully set in until like a couple days after that. I didn't really think anything about getting in trouble because the cops also told me that there were so many people that saw from their balconies. And I just, in my head, there was nothing that anyone could say that would get me in trouble. This was all self-defense. Like, he came after me. I was just trying to go to my concert, and this was not what I expected. So I didn't think anything about me getting in trouble until probably a couple weeks after that. And my mom told me that the case wasn't closed yet. And I just thought that that was weird. It should have just been closed. But, you know, the legal system, they have to do all their checks.
When you first connected with your mom after this happened, what was that like?
So the police told me that my mom went to the other hospital to be with John. And that was not necessarily true. Like, she didn't go there to be with John. She went there because they asked her to identify him. And so when I heard that, I was a little bit hurt. But then when I saw her, I kind of told her that, but I was just so happy to see her because I hate the doctors. Like, I just hate blood and all that stuff. And I had to get stitches, and I've never had stitches before. So I waited until she got there. And there was like a point where I was probably waited for like 30 minutes or an hour with my stab wound open. It wasn't bleeding anymore. It was just gross though. But it was just like open, and I was waiting to get stitches, and I was just waiting for her, and I was just like frustrated. But it wasn't her fault at all. She had to do what she had to do.
The next couple weeks, how did it hit you? What were you thinking?
I was thinking that I didn't want to be depressed. I didn't want this to control my life. I wanted to get out. I wanted to live life. But I didn't want to go back to work yet. It was just really hard to go back to work because he had stalked me there. He had made that phone call. And in my mind, I couldn't put the two and two together why I didn't want to go back. I just knew that I wasn't ready to go back to work. And I tried to just live my best life and go out with my friends and try to get back into normalization that way. But it wasn't healthy for me to go out with my friends and go drinking with them. Right. I did other avenues that were healthy for me, but just the combination of going out and drinking with friends, it's just alcohol can act as a depressant, so it just makes things worse, especially when I went through such a traumatic experience. I wasn't fully dealing with it yet.
What did it take then for you to deal with it?
So I just kind of got worse. I had panic attacks all the time. I would try to do simple tasks like grooming a dog that I used to do so easily, or just like cooking, and I had the shortest fuse. It was like everything would set me off, and I would just snap, and then I would break down, and I just didn't know how to handle it. And I felt mentally insane because it was like I didn't know that they were triggers, and I felt like, yeah, this happened, but I didn't understand it fully. And then I started to I went to therapy, but I wasn't with the best therapist, and so I didn't get help really, and she could only see me once a month, which wasn't helpful for what I went through. I needed to see someone twice a week or once a week. And so I one day kind of just packed up my bags and moved to Texas to go stay with my sister, my other sister. and she just had surgery and had taken time off from work. So she was there like for me 24/7. And she got me in with a great EMDR therapist. And then I began EMDR therapy, went to therapy twice a week. I was doing rock climbing or hikes every day. And I was just really able to focus on healing. And that's a time where I really had a lot of growth and was able to understand PTSD a little bit more. And to also, I felt completely healed. Probably like 6 months after that of doing all of that work, I felt like I was completely normal. And then I moved back to California and then started going out with my friends again. I kept up therapy, but not EMDR therapy. I just switched back to talk therapy.
Can you explain what EMDR therapy is?
Adding an extra sense onto talking about your experience of your trauma. And then it's like you either do something with a finger, lights, or tappers. It's like there's multiple ways you can do EMDR therapy. I've done like all of the above. Wow. But it's just bringing that extra sense. And then when you bring that extra sense into it, you're able to kind of connect things. And it just like helps fully. It will be like I'll start talking about one thing and then I'll be like, oh, I didn't feel safe here in my childhood or whatnot. And it just like connects the dots for you where you can process it better. In EMDR therapy, I always have a safe space I can go back to where if things get too hard, where I feel like my emotions are a 10, I can't do this conversation anymore, then my therapist brings me back to this place, or we bring in a protective figure into that place where something traumatic happened, and it just helps a lot.
Wow.
When you decided and you had gone through all this and all the trauma, when did you decide that you're going to help other people? When did that come about?
I don't know if there was like a time where it fully clicked, like, oh, I need to do this. I think that there was little moments here and there. I think it was multiple people reaching out saying that they left their abuser because they heard Dirty John, or it's the messages I got from this one girl who said that she used my technique of pedal kicking in an attack to get out of her attack too. So it's like little things here and there of people keep telling me that it's working for them and that they're taking things away from their life that needs to be taken away and trying to have a healthy lifestyle because of me and my story or my mom's story. And I just feel like I've always wanted to help others and make the world a better place. That dog grooming, that's great. I can make a dog beautiful, but to really help someone's soul, their life, it just makes me feel better about myself and that I actually have a purpose. So I feel like this past year, it's all come together, and maybe like a couple of weeks ago, I want to do life coaching now because I'm on the phone sometimes for hours with some ladies or men, talking to them about how to leave their abuser in the correct way. And I love talking to them, but I still have to pay for my apartment.
When did LA Times approach you and your mom about the story? Like, how did that all come about, the Dirty John story?
So the LA Times approached my mom and I want to say 6 months after everything happened. It was when I was living in Texas, and my mom told me, she was like, hey, how do you feel about this coming out? And at first I didn't want anything out because of how the people who I thought were my friends what they thought about it, me thinking I was crazy, not believing me. And so it was like I was thinking about all these people putting doubt on me and kind of victim shaming me. And so that made me really cautious to tell my story. And at that point, I was really into church at that point. So I sat down and I prayed for probably weeks about it. And I just felt that it would do good, that people can learn from this experience, and hopefully some others can relate. Unfortunately, they can relate, but it's great to bond together opposed to say this girl, she went through something terrible and she deserved it. It was just a time to be all together as women. And it's like the Me Too movement was going on. So it's like, yes, there was the haters saying that I shouldn't do this, but then there was like all these other empowering ladies who were coming forward and telling their truth.
Yeah, were you surprised by that impact that it had?
I was surprised at how big it was. Like, I thought maybe like 20 people would like take this and be like, oh, I can relate to this, but it's been literally millions.
Again, going back to the red flags and the things throughout that process, what are some of the things, did you learn anything new that you hadn't known before about your life and this whole case through either the podcast or the series?
So when the LA Times came out, it was a podcast series, and Christopher Goffard, it's from a male's perspective. I love Christopher Goffard, but that story kind of needs to be told from someone that's maybe experienced an abusive relationship. And he didn't have understanding of coercive control, about love bombing, or any of these terms. And to him, it was just so interesting. And so he went on, I believe it was Real Crime Profile, and he talked about it with Laura Richards. And Laura Richards told him, well, you know that Debra was in a coercive controlled relationship. And he was like, I did not know that. And so he wanted to get to know more. And so it was really great that we connected with Laura Richards because we heard about that. And I actually speak with her now. And thank you. And we're trying to fight for laws on coercive control in California and in New York. And it just really, I was able to come with her and get so much understanding of who John was and why he did the things he did, and that there's so many other guys like this, and there's different like levels. I want to say there's narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, and then there's just other personality disorders like borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and there's all these types of people out there that can be toxic. And I say that like borderline and bipolar, like there are treatments for that, but there's not really treatments for narcissists or psychopaths or sociopaths because you lack that empathy. And that's a huge thing for wanting to grow as a person for others, I want to say. Yeah. Like, a narcissist would want to grow because he would want to gain financial security, or he wants to be at a place where he can have power over people. But for other people to grow, they want to be a better person.
And you said that you do the public speaking now. What are some things that you talk about?
I talk about coercive control relationships, the red flags that I was able to see as an outsider with John Meehan. Then I also talk about how to defend yourself in a knife attack. And just some ways to kind of avoid relationships like John or just toxic people in general.
So do you want to talk about some of those red flags?
Sure. So one is, I'll do that. One is no eye contact. When a person doesn't give you eye contact, it either means that they are nervous, that they have personality disorder, or they have a social disorder. And so that's something to kind of look out for and kind of notice like why this person's not looking you in the eye. And one other thing is your intuition. Your stomach has more cells in your stomach than a dog has in its whole entire body. So we are very intuitive people, and you have to listen to your gut. So no eye contact, your gut. And then also, I want to say having a good relationship with others. Like, does he have a good relationship with his family? How good of a relationship does he have with his family? Because there is also narcissists that are really close to their mothers. And they will be super close to their mothers because their moms are their enabler. And they give them whatever they want. And they also kind of, if they have a problem, their mom is going to tell them, oh, no, honey, it's okay. It's that person's fault. It's not your fault.
So they basically pacify and kind of reinforce the ego, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So it's like you got to evaluate their relationships with their family and then also their friends. Because I was with someone, I want to say they were a sociopath, but we went to high school together. So he had a lot of friends, but they were kind of like the friends that you go out and only party with.
What do people need to know if they're being stalked?
So that is honestly very difficult because every stalking situation, you need to assess it. It's always important to tell other people because literally when you come out of the woodworks and you're like, he hit me, you need to have proof. You need to have pictures. You need to have someone else backing you up saying, oh yeah, she told me on, August 20th, he hit me or he hit her. So it's like you need to have evidence in other people to build a case against people.
Wow. What are some safety tips for online dating?
So I used to go on dating apps, and I was the biggest. Wait, am I allowed to cuss on here?
Yes.
Okay. I was the biggest dumbass. I would be like, pick me up at my place. I want you to drive so I can have a few drinks, And that was my mindset. I was like, I want them to pick me up so I don't have to drink and drive and spend money on an Uber. And that way they'll take me there. I'll get the drink, I'll drink, they'll get the food, and it'll be like I just get taken care of.
I've never heard that so together and so concise.
Truthful?
No, so truthful
truthful.
and so concise though, but all three in a row. Knows where you live, captive in a car, now indebted for the alcohol and the food and all the...
To be a safe girl on a dating website, don't tell them where you live. Meet them in public probably 3 to 4 to 5 times or until you feel like you can completely trust this person. I'm really selective of who I have over at my place. Just because there could be someone that you make friends with at yoga class, but they could be a toxic person. And so it's like you just need to evaluate this person before you let them into your personal space. But also Uber there or drive there. I would say Uber because it's always just nice to be like, okay, I could literally leave and dip out if this guy is super creepy or this girl is super creepy and just run away and hop in an Uber and go home.
And there's a record of it too. I mean, where you go, where you land, if you never needed
That's
that for
so
anything.
true. And then also, I would talk to them maybe once or twice before getting together with them. Because, on dating apps, I feel like if you talk and you're just talking for months, that's great and all. You're building trust in this person. But when you get together on that date, what are you going to talk about? Also, when you're talking to them for a long period of time, it's like you're already building that trust, but you never met them in person to get to know who they really are. They can be putting on this facade. They could be catfishing you.
What can you do to be more aware out in public?
Okay, so if you're out in public and you're afraid that someone may be stalking you, okay, I would definitely... Well, first of all, don't put your location tags on Instagram.
That seems to be number one.
Don't geotag your location is our number one tip from every guest we've had on.
Right? Or if you're wanting to do it, just do it after you leave.
What adjustments have you made to your life since all this happened?
Just a lot of adjustments with people, to be honest. Because I feel like I'm talking about toxic people all the time, that I'm like, I have a lot in my own life too, and it's like, I'm an empath and I'm just easygoing, and just people get glued to that sometimes, and I'm a target for narcissists and stuff, so it's like they're glued to me, and I'll make friends with them because I just want to see the good in everyone too. And sometimes I have to be like, okay, they're actually kind of mean to me. Maybe I shouldn't be friends with them, or maybe I shouldn't hang out with them. And so I've had to put a lot of boundaries on those relationships, or just honestly relationships where I've been doing stuff where I don't want to do. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make me in a very good mood. And I've really learned to put self-care and love into my life. And so I feel like, knock on wood, at this point, I'm doing so great mentally and I feel healed. But I know that there's always work to do. And I know that if I say I'm healed, a lot of times I'm just burying other stuff under the rug.
Right. In terms of self-defense, do you have any ideas out there that could help anyone?
Okay, so in a knife attack, you gotta control the knife. You gotta honestly, if you're on the floor, that's a lot of the times the best way, because you can use your legs, and your legs have the largest muscle the largest bone in your body. So that's where most of your power is going to come from.
Terra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if there's anyone out there in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
I'm Jacob Tula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.